Members, it's now 5 o'clock. We'll start the last session of today's public hearing. Welcome. The administration and deputations have all come in. I'd like to remind deputations and individuals that you can use the earpiece and also microphones. Channel 0 is floor, Channel 1 is Cantonese, Channel 2 is English, Channel 3 is Putonghua. Every deputation will have 3 minutes. The timer in the room will beep when the 3 minutes are up. If you have not given us a written submission, you can do so after the meeting. You can send it to the clerk. I'd like to remind deputations that the oral remarks made here by you will not be covered or protected by the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance. The same goes for your written submissions. Also like to mention this to the members of the public. Please be reminded of the notice to attending meetings at the Legislative Council and also people in the public gallery when meetings are held. The security measures are listed in that notice, and the notice has been included in the letter sent to you by the clerk, and it is also tabled for your information. Those of you in the public gallery can get a copy of that notice if necessary. Before we start, I will talk about a few points about the arrangement of this public hearing. The purpose of the public hearing is to allow members and officials to listen to members of the public. There will be 3 parts to this session. In the first part, deputations will be able to speak one by one. In the second part, officials will respond to the views put forward by the public. And in the third part, time will be given for members to ask questions. I must point out that in order that the meeting can be conducted in an orderly manner, according to the procedures for this meeting, when members ask questions, they must do so to me, and then I will call upon officials or members of the public to answer. Before the officials or members of the public can speak, members should not be speaking among themselves or to the administration or to members of the public direct. I hope you will abide by that strictly. Also, I have seen in previous public hearings that some members may give their remaining time to speak to designated deputations to speak. I will not allow that to happen because that designated or specified deputation will have more time to speak than others. And this is not fair to the other deputations. But I will ask the specified deputation to provide further views. If the member cannot use up his time to speak, he should just wrap up and allow other members to speak so that more members can have the chance to speak. I will ask members of the public that according to Procedures 87, the chairman can order anyone exhibiting gross misconduct or who is seen to be very likely to exhibit gross misconduct to be evicted from the room. Therefore, during the meeting, you must keep order. The details are in the notice that I mentioned. To make sure that the meeting will be conducted in an orderly manner, I can evict anyone who does not keep order without warning. Okay? You have been seated according to the number assigned. I will now start to call upon you to speak one by one. First, Mr. Yim Man Singh. Thank you, Chair. The national anthem is just like the national flag and national emblem, they are symbols of the country according to the Constitution. The country represents everybody. Legislating to protect the national anthem means legislating to safeguard the dignity of all people in the country. The US, Canada, and Western countries do have legislation to protect the national anthem. This is not a monster at all. It is the common practice internationally. Every country will make the national anthem law according to its own history and culture. Hong Kong has one country, two systems. So our national anthem law will not be totally the same as that in other countries. Next, Mr. Poon Long Chung. Thank you, Chair. You will definitely insult yourself before others will insult you. Now the powers that be do not respect the people. They are not respected. And now you say we do not respect the country. You are using criminal offenses and the national anthem law to scare the people, thinking that you will win back respect. But that is not going to happen. If you look at the national anthem law, just look at the preliminary that everybody should respect the national anthem law, and you are using legislation as a political way to restrain the behavior of the people. This should only happen in the PRC. Hong Kong should not do something like that. You are flouting Article 16 of the Bill of Rights ordinance, because everybody should be able to receive information of any kind. But now you are writing an ideology into the common law system. You are using a criminal code to control the thoughts of people. There are many ways to express your love or otherwise for the country. And technology is developing by the day. What are you trying to control? The government must come clean about this. What is worst is you are not allowed to disrespect the national anthem. Even if you respect the national anthem, somebody in Shanghai was detained administratively for 5 days just because they hummed the tune when the national anthem was played. Why is it that he was detained? The national anthem law states that you should respect the national anthem, but it also dictates the way how you should respect the national anthem. In Clause 7, it says it is an offense to insult the national anthem with intent, and you will be imprisoned for 3 years. And you are talking about publicly and intentionally insulting the national anthem with intent. But how can you define all these? Is there a political purpose that you are trying to achieve? Liu Xiaobo said in a book that this is a tool to play with ideologies by the powers that be. If you only blindly love the country, you will be doomed. And you say that students should be taught to sing the national anthem, and the spirit and the history of the national anthem should be taught. But then look at the lyric writer and also the score writer. They were persecuted and they died horribly. How do you expect us to explain the history of the national anthem and also what the country is doing and expect our students? Sorry, your time is up. Mr. Zhang Wingfei. Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the national anthem law is to give play to the spirit of respect, and it also seeks to prevent acts of insult towards the national anthem. And in the common law system of Hong Kong, definitions on distorting and disrespecting the national anthem law can be subject to long-established principles, and there will be fair and just judgment at court. Our daily lives will not be affected, and the public need not be worried. I think people with ulterior motives are trying to mislead the public. Mr. Jeffrey Ma, at the beginning of the legal year, said to the media that the oath-taking ceremony of judges is important, and it is right for us to sing and play the national anthem on that occasion. He said it will not affect the rule of law and equality before the law for everybody. And even the freedom of speech is not unfettered. Insulting and distorting the national anthem law should not be permitted. Therefore, the spirit of the national anthem law teaches us or reminds us that we should respect the national anthem bill so we can be rational and calm in putting forward our views. Some people say respect is in your heart, not in your mouth. And it is said that it is very sad and tragic for us to have to legislate for respect. Well, yes, I think it's saddening that you should be taught to respect people. Some people repeatedly flout rules and regulations. They may say they would be peaceful in putting forward their views, but then they would think that they can be creative in adopting violent ways in order to play to the gallery and break the law. These people deliberately flout the law, and they are bringing this upon themselves. I absolutely support legislating for the national anthem, so we all know what moral yardsticks we should go by. Mr. Ng Wai Leung from the Hong Kong Construction General Workers Union. We fully support the national anthem bill. It is a symbol and sign of the country. Ever since reunification in 1997, we have been part of China for over 20 years. But some people are still wielding the excuses of freedom of speech, and they disrespect the national anthem. They are doing everything possible to insult the national anthem. If they cannot be persuaded to behave better, we cannot but be forced into adopting another measure to help these people improve their behavior so that there can be some basic respect for the national anthem. Mr. Chen YK, good afternoon. China has risen. Chinese people think that tomorrow will be better. Nobody wants to go back to a past where we were bullied. The new generation might not heard of how Chinese people were bullied. The national anthem can boost morale. It can bring about a better sense of belonging. Hong Kong is an inalienable part of the country. We should try to understand the country's past. And this bill will help to unify the Chinese people. History tells us that unity amongst people will bring about prosperity and stability and sustained development of the economy. Therefore, it is important to know the origin of the national anthem, and it is necessary for primary and secondary schools to adopt education on the national anthem to allow young people to have a stronger sense of national identity. So they will form respect for the country. And we should encourage the public to seriously play and sing the national anthem to realize the spirit of one country, two systems. Next, Mr. Ng Check-in. I'm here to respond to certain opposition to the national anthem. I like to attack them. It is said that the national anthem cannot educate the public to love the country. It would only offend people. I like to remind legislators that penalties and the law are not here to educate. Penalties are to increase the cost of contravention. People will weigh the gains and pains when they do something. And let us talk about cost and benefit analysis. Like for the economy, I like to say, penalties are not here to educate. Where should we educate? In schools, in society. But if we look at the opposition camp legislators, they are telling you that you should break the law in order to achieve justice. they are trying to increase the benefit for lawbreakers, saying that going to jail will make your life more meaningful. Benefit is not about money, but aspirations or the limelight. Secondly, they say the law is not clear, there are gray areas, and people would be inadvertently caught. Remember, we have the common law in Hong Kong. The judge will arrive at judgment according to case law, which is of reference value. Responding to mentality of the opposition camp, well, if you say imprisonment makes your life more meaningful and you want to break the law to achieve justice, then please come up with a case law for the court. But they will not do so because they have a different system to measure gain and pain. They only have eyes on their stipend, being a legislator. They will not do what I mentioned. All these years, we have seen the opposition camp do this. When A and B argue, they will whisper in the ear, "Don't take it. Beat him." However, when they do so, they themselves back off. So I definitely support the National Anthem bill. And I believe starting from today, we should limit and suppress the despicable behavior of the opposition camp. Ms. Lo So Kwon, on serious occasions when the national anthem was played, someone displayed a playful look and they turned their back to the national flag. They used disrespectful hand gestures. And also when international games or soccer games were played in Hong Kong, some youngsters deliberately did not stand up. They also booed the national anthem. Such behavior shows the deficiency of civic education in Hong Kong. These are considered an intentional behavior. It is definitely not inadvertent or unconscious. Whether an act is deliberate, the average person can tell this. And this is what the bill is all about. The spirit of the bill is respect. And this is easily understood by the public. And this is not going to have any impact on the daily lives of the average public. And there is a very low chance in my eyes for people to be inadvertently caught by the law. And I'm sure the government will investigate into cases in a just manner. Next, Mr. Lam Hang Kwong. When the public were consulted and the administration talked to many different sectors, including the entertainment, the academia, and legislators, and there was very exhaustive discussion.
The legislative work of the national anthem law, I think there's a certain legal basis in terms of public opinion. I think there will be clear explanation on what will cause infringement of the law. Now, even though some in the opposition say that the national anthem bill is vague on the definition of insulting the national anthem, and even though they say that the propagation of the national anthem law would prove to be an invasive step for Legislative Council members and members of the public, yet I myself and others are not fearful of the bill. Most members of the public do not resent the basis for legislating the national anthem bill. They are not concerned that they will suffer any loss in their rights and freedom, and they are not fearful. Mr. Raymond Kong, I'm a member of the Sai Kung District Council. The criminal sanctions here are up to 3 years imprisonment, and the legal sector has said that the definition of distorting and disrespecting the national anthem is not clearly defined. Now, you can say that there are clear ways to delineate what is bank robbery, but you can't have a clear definition of what constitutes an insult of the national anthem. For instance, someone is booing the national anthem in a stadium, or he or she happens to be coughing or sneezing. Maybe that one does have the intent, but can you prove that he or she is intentional? He can defend himself by saying that I want to show some kind of sarcasm. Now, or he may say that I had the physical urge to sneeze. Now, the government can arrest someone, and then only after a long procedure would that person be proven innocent. So you need to clarify what constitutes an infringement of the law before you legislate. Otherwise, you would prevent people from speaking out. And so this would be different from usual criminal offense. So the bill has incorporated the national anthem education to the system at secondary and primary schools. There are already some clear guidelines in the education sector, so this is not necessary. And when you have certain sanctions, then you should have clear definitions and explanations. The government should withdraw the bill and not legislate hastily. Next, Mr. Lamore. A small number of radical and persons with ulterior motives, they don't respect the country, and they disregard the basic law. They act in ways that insult the country and set poor examples for the younger generation. And there have been these incidents of insulting the national anthem, and this shows a problem in our education sector. And there were university graduates who insulted the national anthem in singing competitions. Now, this is very saddening to parents and teachers. We should educate the younger generation on the meaning of the national anthem, and so that people will respect the national anthem, and our nation can move forward. Next, Mr. Chu Pui Hong. Now, Hong Kong all along has enjoyed a high degree of freedom of speech, but that doesn't mean there are no limitations. Now, without a guideline on national anthems, then people may challenge the national anthem and insult the national anthem, and that would be very unsatisfactory. Now, the schools would be affected. The young children would learn that type of behavior, and that would be very undesirable. Next, Mr. Lok Yong of the Hong Kong Talent Import Association. Now, our organization is in support of now our association has as its members large numbers of professionals, many of them from the mainland. We help to promote Hong Kong competitiveness. Now, in November 2017, the MPCSC has stipulated the inclusion of the national anthem law in Annex 3 of the Basic Law. Our association is in support of this local legislation in order to preserve the dignity of the country. This would help strengthen the legal system in Hong Kong, and it also contribute to stability in Hong Kong. Now, LegCo has taken into account public opinion in Hong Kong as well as local circumstances in this legislative exercise. This follows the one country, two systems principle, and it's consistent with the practice of a high degree of autonomy in Hong Kong. So our association supports this legislation. Next, Ms. Hong Lai San. I support the legislation of the National Anthem Bill. I am a mother of 2 children. I was born and raised locally. I was educated abroad and worked abroad, and I experienced the feeling of being discriminated against abroad. So it is rather not acceptable that some people insult the national identity and anthem. Now, the national identity is expressed in the national anthem, the national emblem, and the national flag. Now, we teach our children to say good morning to people, to say thank you to people who did something for them. We practice these rules in our family, so we must have the same respect for our country. We should educate our children from an early age. If someone doesn't know how to sing the national anthem, if he's in the 20s and 30s, he should learn that right now, just in the same way that we teach our children to from an early age to respect and to be thankful to their parents. I'm just an ordinary Hong Kong citizen. I love this place. I very much hope that my children can grow up in a very nice place. I hope that the honorable members should not be fastidious and about the definitions of constitutes and insult to the national anthem. it's just like for other criminal offenses. It's based on a moral respect. You know that the legislation is against who offend deliberately. Now, the sanctions are to tell people that you have committed offense, so you are now being punished. So that should be the basis for legislation. The legislation is not targeted against the public at large, but at those who offend deliberately. I don't think the honorable members would try to support those offending minority members of this place. It's right to love one's country. You want those who govern the country to act in a way that cause the people to respect and love the country. Now, has this been done in our country? This is the issue. We shouldn't rely on legislation to make people love the country. It should be up to those who govern on how they govern. Now, I'm against those who champion an independent Hong Kong, but I do not like the powers that be. Now, the fact is that there are two Chinas. Now, if you don't let them use the certain flag, then are you going to have people use the old national Chinese flag? Now, some people publish on newspapers the Hong Kong emblem and Hong Kong flag now, and they didn't apply, and they are accused of because of that. Now, it's ridiculous that one has to apply. So if you use the national emblem or the Hong Kong emblem on a T-shirt, you would be considered as desecrating the national emblem. I think that's really absurd. Next, Mr. Teng Chi-Fai of the Hong Kong Chinese Medicine Association. Now, we have the following views. Now, the Hong Kong SAR is an inalienable part of the PRC, according to the Standing Committee decision. That is the Standing Committee of the NPC, and according to the Basic Law, the SAR government should, through local legislation, implement the PRC national anthem law. This is the constitutional responsibility of the SAR government, and it is an absolutely logical act. Now, as Hong Kong people are Chinese citizens, we should love our own country and preserve the dignity of the national anthem. So our association identifies with and supports the SAR government in the legislation of the national anthem bill, and we hope that through legislation and regulating the use and playing of the song of the national anthem to strengthen the national identity and promote patriotism. Now we have submitted our written submission. We urge the members to complete the legislation work as soon as possible to promote the dignity of our country. Next, the Association of Civil Aviation Staff. We have a written submission. I will submit that to the Secretariat later. Simply speaking, we support the bill. We hope that the bill can be passed as quickly as possible because this is the proper constitutional responsibility of the ASL government, and we do not agree that the bill would deprive people of freedom of expression. There have been a variety of comments, and some of the examples are very far-fetched. They try to show that there are problems with the bill, but these are rather trivial, and they shouldn't weaken our support of the bill. So I would like to tell you how we feel about this, about the controversy concerning the national anthem in the past few years. Now, for some people, if they are unhappy with the government or with the regime, you can inform people of your dissatisfaction and of the reasons, but you should respect the song that is respect the March of the Volunteers as our national anthem. You should respect the background of this song, and we should be aware that many people sang this song when our nation was going through one of our most difficult periods in history. When the 28th Battalion went to Burma to do their part in the Second World War, this is the song that they sang. Now, if people are disrespectful to this song, then we are being disrespectful to the soldiers who fought on the battlefields to preserve our country back then. Next, Ms. Siu Wing Yi, Hong Kong Women's Association of Hong Kong. Now, we support the bill. The national anthem is a symbol of the dignity of the country. This is a constitutional responsibility of Hong Kong and Chinese people. Now, according to Article 18, the national anthem bill it has been duly incorporated into Annex 3, and the scope of the bill should enable the national anthem law to be implemented in a practical way in Hong Kong. It's not entirely up to the ASEAN government. Now, some people say that there should be freedom of expression. Now, according to the Hong Kong Bill of Rights, Article 16, the freedom is not absolute. Now, under FACC number 4 of 19 94. Now it's very clear that one cannot insult the national flag to express their dissatisfactions, and that the same goes for the national anthem. Now, if there are no criminal sanctions, how can the legislative purpose be attained? Now, some people are concerned about the upper limit of these criminal sanctions, but we think that the Hong Kong judges can adjust the penalties in an appropriate way, level of penalty in an appropriate way. Now, so as for the time limit for prosecution, now we should duly consider the time necessary for criminal investigations. Next, Mr. Wong Kin Long.
I'm a resident of Macau and Hong Kong. I have assisted Macau electoral members to vet the local legislation of Macau. Through my sharing, I'd like to share with you the experience of Macau. First of all, I'd like to state that I object to the sanctions proposed in the National Anthem Bill. Many deputations said that we should follow the spirit of the National Anthem law, but the bill in Hong Kong is far more stringent than the National Anthem law in China. Looking at Article 715 of the National Anthem law, insulting the National Anthem law will result in warning or 15 days of custody, and so it is stipulated clearly that what is provided in the proposed in the bill, if applied in the mainland, normally there will not be any criminal prosecution. There would only be penalties such as administrative custody. The precedent in the mainland is that people who breach the National Anthem law will be put in custody for a few days, only when as to what would constitute a crime. I think the Chinese legal system explained that this would only be very serious, cases would it constitute a criminal offense. And it's very different from the bill in Hong Kong, because everything is regarded as a criminal offense, and a 3-year imprisonment is proposed. Why is it that you have thus such I think in legal system in Hong Kong, they have the principle of minimal intervention, namely the criminal law should be the last resort, so that one would not incriminate people in any trivial manner. Also, in the National Anthem law, there is no provision for a 3-year imprisonment penalty, but this is actually contained in the Chinese criminal law. The criminal law of the mainland is not included in Annex 2 of Basic Law, and Hong Kong has no obligation to also follow the 3-year imprisonment rule. So all we have to do is, I think so long as we make it a criminal offense, a crime to insult the national anthem would suffice. Of course, I've heard the other deputations. We were told that if one insults the national anthem or the emblem, the penalty will be 3 years of imprisonment. But there's no strict requirement that it should be 3 years imprisonment. Insulting the national emblem or flag, I think the penalty is 1 year. In Macau, if you insulted the Portuguese national flag, it was 2 years. So I think we can reduce the penalty. I think your time's up. For this session, a total of 18 deputations have already spoken. At this point, I would like to invite the Secretary to give a global response. Following that, members may ask questions. Thank you. I'd like to first of all thank all the deputations for expressing the views. A total of 18 deputations have spoken during this session. Together with the 5 earlier sessions, we have 110 individuals and deputations who have come here to express the views. And we've heard different opinion and views in support of the legislation, and others also pointed out that in the local legislation of the national anthem law, there are areas of concern. Some deputations have referred to the contents of the bill and expressed some and shown that they have some misunderstanding. So I will now give a very brief response to all that. First of all, regarding the local legislation of the national anthem law, the national anthem law is incorporated into Annex 3 of the Basic Law. The national anthem law is a symbol of the country, and so the national anthem law and incorporating it into Annex 3 of the Basic Law is compatible with the laws of Hong Kong, and we also implementing the national anthem law by way of local legislation. And secondly, in the local legislation for the national anthem law, the purpose is is that the public will respect the national anthem, and any act which is a public involving a public insult of the national anthem would result in a criminal sanction. So there are therefore criminal sanctions proposed in the bill. In the bill itself, education and regulation are both provided. There are, guidelines to help people, to lead people, to guide people to respect the national anthem. So when attending an occasion when the national anthem is being played, the proper etiquette is to stand solemnly and show respect. In considering whether there is a breach resulting in criminal liability, it would depend on whether or not the act is a deliberate insult of the national anthem. In Section 7 of the bill, I think that is provided for. So that's the main spirit of the local legislation. Some deputations said that we are forcing people to be patriotic through the enactment of the national anthem bill. That is not true. We are concerned that we understand that our society does not accept any acts which would constitute an insult of the national anthem, and that's why we need to provide for a criminal penalty or sanction. But the majority of the people of Hong Kong, for the majority of the people, respecting the national anthem is something that they can do. If you don't have any intention to insult the national anthem, you wouldn't need to worry that you would inevitably be breaking the law. Also, the second point raised by many deputations is about freedom of expression. Apparently, they're saying that any form of restraint or freedom of expression is not acceptable. I think that is a major misunderstanding. In the earlier sessions, I already responded to this point, and some deputations have cited a ruling by the CFA in respect of freedom of expression. And that is, while we fully protect the freedom of expression and speech, and that is provided for by the Basic Law and the Common Law, at the same time, the national anthem, flag, and anthem being the symbol of our country cannot be insulted. So regarding if one expresses an opinion through the insult of the national anthem, it should be subject to constraints. So I think this is not just confined to the national anthem. In other areas, I think people may have different views on any particular issue or subject. People may hold very strong views and different views, but through freedom of expression, if they resort to means which are not allowed by the law, then this is something we need to think about. And coming back to the core of the bill, and some deputations have already alluded to this. We're talking about basically respect. We're talking about one shouldn't deliberately commit an act that is an insult to the national anthem, and this is something which the community would accept. In the bill, through the preamble, we are incorporating 3 sections of the national anthem law into the preamble, and as such, it will not form part of the provisions of the bill, but it does explain the intent or the purpose of the national anthem law. One of which is to safeguard the dignity of the national anthem law. It also refers to the national dignity, and so I believe that if you look at other jurisdictions in different countries, the nationals of other countries, if you talk about sense of nationalism, love for one's own country, I think that is, common sense. So to actually link this up to any political ideology is not right. Regarding the time bar for prosecution, I'd like to reiterate again that our main consideration is effective enforcement, and we strike a balance between effective enforcement and we are proposing that it should be within 1 year after the commissioner is aware of the commission of the commission committing of the offence, or 2 years after the events. So in many of our local ordinances, there is also a specific prosecution time bar. So this is basically to ensure effective enforcement and provide for a reasonable period of prosecution. According to the common law system in Hong Kong, after the bill becomes law, only after the bill becomes law will all these provisions will come into effect. And finally, in the national laws of the mainland, there is reference to the arrangement for administrative custody. In the criminal code, there is also provision for a penalty of imprisonment, which is 3 years. So you cannot just look at the national anthem law and say that there is no provision for imprisonment. In fact, there is such a provision. If you breach that provision, there is the provision for 3 years imprisonment. In the Macau ordinance, again, there is provision for 3 years imprisonment. In Hong Kong, of course, we may not have to follow 100% the national law or the laws of other jurisdictions. We have to look at our own legal system. The national flag and anthem ordinance provide for such penalties, and the court there are also a maximum period of imprisonment and fine, but the court will look at the actual circumstances of the case before deciding on the final penalty. So through local legislation, we've already catered to the local circumstances and given due regard to our legal system. Thank you. Thank you, Secretary. It is now time for members to ask questions. So far, 4 members have indicated, or 5 members would like to ask questions. Ms. Ho Kai Ming is asking his question for first round, so I'll give him the priority. Followed by Mr. Oh Chong Shing, Mr. Kwok Wai Keung, Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, and Mr. Tony Chair. Mr. Ho, you have 4 minutes. Thank you. Actually, I have a question for Mr. Chen Kao, but I believe he's gone. Many members of the public have expressed their dissatisfaction against the present government when we discussed the national anthem law. Does it mean that if the President Trump is not the president, then they can do away with the national anthem law, or the Yellow Jackets in Paris? I think once you have the law, or if you need to enact a piece of legislation, you wouldn't support the law or otherwise just because you like a particular politician or not. I think the spirit of the law is about respect. and the law provides for the minimum standard. We're talking about a minimum standard which people can all abide by. I think, according to our culture, I think you must have, rules before you can govern people's behavior. So laws actually serve an education purpose. So even if you don't like this piece of legislation, I think you should at least, observe the basic respect. I was going to have a dialogue with Mr. Chen, but he's gone already. Of course, the court's ruling will give us the confidence or comfort, so that I don't think we need to spell out all the behavior that should be subject to regulation. I don't think you can exhaust all kinds of behavior and determine what is right and what is wrong, what is acceptable and what is not. So I hope that the enactment of the bill can be completed as soon as possible, so that once we start to have a case law, then we will be able to we will be clear about what will constitute an offense or not. Well, the purpose of the bill is to educate and to regulate behavior. Through such discussion today, I think, generally speaking, whatever the, I think in any jurisdiction, I think that the citizens would respect the national anthem. Mr. Oh Chong-Shing, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank all the 110 deputations for taking the time to attend our hearing today. I've attended most of the sessions. For those who support or object the proposals, I think we should respect all such views. I personally believe that the national anthem, like the national flag and emblem, are symbols of the People's Republic of China and a symbol of our sovereignty, and respect is very important. I think that this law is not so uncommon. In the US and Japan, they also have similar laws to protect the national dignity. What I want to say is that the national anthem law is already incorporated under Article 23 of the Basic Law. So it is a national law which should be promulgated or implemented by way of local legislation in Hong Kong. So this is a very good opportunity now for people from all walks of life to express their opinion and as to how we can implement one country, two system and so on. I support the proposal in the bill. But when hearing the deputations today, I've heard many people, stating different types of queries which are not really so convincing. They talk about the proposal weakening freedom of expression, people may inadvertently break the law and so on. Now, honestly, if you don't break the law, you need to worry about these things. If you do not deliberately challenge the law, you don't have to worry. What I want to say is that let's not politicize the whole issue, and secondly, do not, treat these, fallacious arguments and regard them to be logical. In the public hearing today, I think many citizens are now watching us live. So I would like the Secretary to explain again Section 7(1)(b) of the bill. So I'd like to give ask the Secretary to explain once again about this section. That is, some members of the public are concerned about this, so that people will not politicize this point. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Oh, for your question. As I said, Section 7 is about offences of insulting behavior, and in determining whether or not the law has been breached, these are the principles that we follow. Mr. Orr is correct in saying that you don't have any intention to insult the national anthem. You needn't worry. In Section 7, it says that if someone were to insult the national anthem publicly and intentionally, including the alteration of the lyrics or the score, or play or sing the anthem in a distorted or disrespectful way, under the common law system, I think one would need to look at the case in question, and we would apply the common sense approach to determine whether that person has publicly and intentionally insulted the national anthem. I think it would not be difficult for the court to deal with that. What we're talking about here is the playing of the national anthem.
If you have the intent to insult it publicly and intentionally, now this is quite different from mispronunciation, or that you are a bad singer, or that you don't know how to sing the national anthem too well. The two are very different, obviously. And the latter will not be caught as a criminal liability. Kwok Wai Keung. Thank you, Chair. Before Mr. Andrew Wen came in, I actually wanted to say that the opposition camp had abandoned the meeting because there was nothing else they could say. But Mr. Andrew Wen is here, and I must withdraw what I was trying to say. And I can say that apart from the Democratic Party, the other parties in the opposition camp have given up on opposing the national anthem bill. I think that is a more accurate way of saying it. Local legislation. It's to entrench the National Act. Therefore, in the process of local legislation, it must be legitimate, reasonable, and just. You can see many countries have similar laws because the national anthem is the embodiment of the dignity of the country. And we are following the legislative process. And you can see that in Hong Kong, there are people who are intent on disrespecting the national anthem. And I need to mention that under one country, two systems, and our understanding of one country includes Hong Kong. Some youngsters who are very young would say that Hong Kong does not belong to one country, but in fact the correct interpretation must be that Hong Kong is within one country, and that is why the national law must apply here. Some deputations say they don't like the powers that be, but they love the country and love Hong Kong. I don't know whether they are schizophrenic. In fact, if you use their standard, then there would not be any powers that be that deserve their respect, because all powers that be have their long history. And if you only look at history and not the present, whether the powers that be are making improvements to people's lives, then I believe you belong to another era and you do not exist in the present. We must make life easy for our compatriots and must help advance civilization. Some people say that they have been disrespecting the national anthem for some time and they are worried that they can no longer do it. Well, it's clear that with the law in place, if they don't want to deport themselves respectfully, then they should skip that part. They should not make nuisance. They should not attend that part of the ceremony. No one is forcing you to enter the stadium early. But if they deliberately go in early and they want to wreak havoc and break the law, then you cannot blame anybody for being convicted because this is already clear. I hope deputations can respect the rule of law and be rational and abide by the law instead of trying to think of ways to attract attention by being different. Some people may just want the limelight and be known to society. In fact, I don't think you can continue your arguments. Well, let's just get on with the legislative process. You don't need any response. It's just a comment. That's correct. Mr. Wong Ting Kwang. Thank you, Chair. We started at 9 this morning, and I have been sitting here to listen to views. I'd like to thank you for coming to express your views. Apart from the first and fifth session, where we saw regrettable behavior, the rest of the deputations have behaved well, and I respect all your views, even if some are different from mine. I believe there is no doubt that the bill has a meaning. The original intent of the law should not be subject to distortion. Don't push the situation to limits. Don't quote unreasonable examples in order to oppose to the law, because this is quite laughable. I particularly appreciate what Mr. Wong Kin Long said. Wong Kin Long is from Macau. He mentioned penalties. I think you know that Hong Kong practices the common law and we go by case law. The penalty in the law is just the maximum. Usually, courts go by case law before meting out penalties. Courts usually do not go for the maximum penalty just like that. Therefore, the setting of penalties in the bill are just the maximum penalties. You just look around. Usually, the maximum penalties are not meted out. And whether an act constitutes a breach, well, I believe you know it too well. You would know it. Inadvertent acts and deliberate acts are very different. I'd like to ask the Secretary here. Now we legislate the National Anthem Bill, and we are talking about the PRC National Anthem. If somebody plays God Save the Queen and insult it, will that be penalized under our law? And if, say, I exhibit an insulting gesture when the U.S. national anthem is played, will there be penalties? Mr. Wong, you are talking about the national anthem of other countries. Secretary. Thank you. This bill is about the PRC national anthem. If there is insulting behavior exhibited towards other national anthems, then depending on the nature of that act, we will see whether it constitutes a breach under different laws. But at least we do not have a dedicated bill for other national anthems. Mr. Wong, any other views? No? Tony Chan? Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to thank the 100-odd deputations and individuals for coming to speak on the National Anthem Bill. To a certain extent, this shows the concern shown towards this bill. Chairman, respecting the national anthem and safeguarding the dignity of the national anthem, which is a symbol of the country, I believe therefore we should legislate to penalize insulting behavior towards the national anthem. I think it's just right and legitimate. I have listened to many views today. The majority support the bill in principle. Some people have expressed views and worries. And as Mr. Wang Ting-kwang was saying, some were quite far-fetched. They used examples. And they also raised questions. Secretary, I think you have already explained clearly that as a bill, if there are vague areas, I'm sure the administration and members would want to clarify them. But if it is just something which is not common, and if you quote equivocal examples to question those, well, I think the Secretary has said that you cannot be exhaustive. We just want to exemplify the principles in the bill. All these years, Hong Kong has enjoyed a high recognition of its rule of law, and members of the public are always abiding by the law, but people have been going for nitty-gritties, saying that these have not been clarified in the law. Well, you can say the same for other laws of Hong Kong. Those people who ask these questions may not really understand that Hong Kong is a city with the rule of law. And in this respect, I'd like to ask the Secretary, when you ask the police to enforce the law, now if somebody probably has broken the law and you enforce the law and you bring prosecution, what is the normal procedure? Even with the national flag and national emblem, I haven't seen people inadvertently caught, as was proposed in some of the examples in this hearing. Can you please explain to the public the procedure? Is it really that easy for ordinances to be abused to arrest inadvertent acts and people? Because we are really just targeting intentional breaking of the law. I don't have a lot of time, Secretary. Thank you. The elements of the offenses are very clear in this bill. Law enforcement agencies, first of all, have to gather evidence, and they have to come up with enough evidence for prosecution. We have seen in previous cases that you must go beyond reasonable doubt if it is a criminal offense. And the court will try the case before a case is determined. We have judicial independence in Hong Kong. And you know that the prosecution threshold is not low at all. 3 more members would like to speak. KK Kwok, Andrew Wen, and Starry Lee. KK Kwok. Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to thank the deputations. In a civilized society, if you sing the national anthem, well, some pro-establishment deputations look-alike said that we should follow the example of Japan and the US. Well, it's good. You mentioned these countries. These are democracies. In the US and Japan, most of the parliamentarians are elected and the presidents and the premier are elected. So how can you compare our country with those countries? In our country, Mr. C calls the shot, and even the State Council, the Hong Kong Macau office, and then the Chinese liaison office in Hong Kong, it's a system for an emperor to rule. How can you compare this with democracies? We have got such feudal systems for very long. So we can't compare ourselves with Japan and the US. Well, having said that, in the US national anthem law, it is only proposed that the national anthem be played, and there are no penalties. In Japan, there have been challenges laid at court on different occasions where teachers felt that they would believe in democracy and they did not want to sing the national anthem because it was undemocratic. Now, Secretary, if Hong Kong can have dual universal suffrage, if all legislators and the CE are elected directly, and if there is also direct election on the mainland, then our youngsters may be convinced that we should have a national anthem bill. You agree? Secondly, throughout the world, people love their country voluntarily. But if the country doesn't act in a proper manner, if there is rampant corruption, if high officials park their wealth in the US and all the CPP, CC members are corrupt, well, given such a situation, when young people show their dissatisfaction towards the powers that be, shouldn't they be understood and be forgiven? You are in touch with our young people. Have you considered why our young people don't have confidence in the country? This is because of the entire system. By the 21st century, we still have a system where an emperor rules above all. Have you got those messages, Mr. Nip? Thank you, Mr. Kwok. Well, Hong Kong is a diversified society. Well, I'm asking for about direct election. I'm answering you. Well, there can be different views in society in Hong Kong. No matter how our political system evolves, that diversity will continue. The so-called democratic system in a country, when it is juxtaposed with this national anthem bill, well, I don't think the two should be set against each other. We are talking about respecting the national anthem and not insulting it. I believe we can all agree to that. And if you look at different countries, well, they do it in a different way. Some have criminal liability, some don't. So as I said, comparison is not at all meaningful here. You said young people are not satisfied. Well, I believe anyone can be dissatisfied with anything. But I like to emphasize that we may have dissatisfaction, we have different views, we have the freedom of expression. But then the way you express your views will still be subject to restraints. And therefore, in the bill, we say if you publicly insult the national anthem bill, you would be subject to criminal sanction. Sorry, your time is up. Mr. Andrew Wan. Thank you, Chairman. I think the Secretary was right in one of the things he said. He said that behavior should be subject to restraint. But then, as legislators, we have a duty to discharge. Some other members said that when we ask questions and we ask technical questions, they say we try to stand in the way. But I don't think that's the case. If you only gesticulate politically and you are blind to the possible loopholes in the law, so the public are inadvertently caught, and if it is a nuisance, I think that should not be the case. The government has a a motive behind everything you do. It may be the political motive, but then you should not target the public.
覺得呢，
Now, I feel that the people in every land should love their country and culture. I'm not against that. But those in power should think, why is it that the people, sometimes the young people, would act in opposition? Now, there are some deep-seated issues that cannot be resolved by stern sanctions. You have to educate them. Why do I say that? Because respect comes from the heart. If you mandate it by action on the outside of people's hearts, that would not be the best approach. Now, Andrew Leung, is rather solemn in his expression sometimes when the national anthem was sung. Maybe someone would accuse him, but in the end it would be resolved in court. Now, the same situation arises for the national flag and national emblem. Now, why is the bill written in this way? Now, what is patriotism? Many people say that I love the country, but I don't love the party. Can you say that in the mainland? Now, you can't. Can I say I love China, but I don't love the party, the Communist Party? Can you say that? You can't. So we ask why you write the bill in certain way. Now, concerning the contents of the bill, now for the national flag and national anthem emblem bill, now the summary procedure is adopted and the prosecution bar is 6 months, and now it's become more harsh. It's 2 years after the matter is uncovered. Now, so is it that recently there have been more incidents about the national anthem? Now, you must make it uniform with the national flag and national emblem. Now, just now a member said you cite examples of concern that are not warranted. Now, for instance, when the LegCo members are sworn in, they don't have to sing the national anthem. Now, the oath-taking ceremony was changed. The requirements were changed. Now, well, if someone was late for a national anthem singing ceremony, now what would happen to him? Now, I raise these questions for further discussion. We should focus on the provisions themselves and not merely try to make accusations. Due to time limitations, I will not ask the Secretary to respond. Ms. Starry Lee. Now, I'd like to respond after hearing Dr. K.K. Kwok. Mr. Kwok, Dr. Kwok is opinionated about our country. Now, if, as the member said, the country is full of officials, I can tell you that our country would not be where it is today. Now, of course, we have to look at the system. Now, every system has its problems. We do have our problems and challenges regarding one country, two systems. But we must take note that the direction is forward moving. Now, if, as the members said, China is so full of problems, we will not be where we are today. But I do admit that we have challenges that we must meet. Now, the members, some members seem to say that democracy is the panacea, but democracy is a system, but democratic system is facing problems in many countries. For instance, in the U.S. So in the U.S., they elected Mr. Trump under the democratic system. So that's worthy of thought. Now, the U.S. probably played a part in the problems in the Middle East. So we're seeing a lot of terrorist attacks. Now, each country's development is subject to problems and challenges. Now, if we fail to see the progress in our own country, then I think we are not being objective enough. Now, I agree with Mr. Wen. We must play the gatekeeping role well in the legislative process. We want to try to explain everything in the details, but not all the details can be resolved. The court has to be the ultimate gatekeeper as long as we don't deliberately try to disrespect the national flag, then one wouldn't be vulnerable under the law. So I think if we pay heed to the law, we won't be caught by it. Now, if you deliberately try to infringe the law, then you would be subject to sanction. We have to trust the administration of justice. Ultimately, the court will take into account all the circumstances before he sentences. Now, this is the same for other offenses. Not every circumstance can be covered in the legislation itself. So we will do our best, and I think this is a challenge common to all legislation, and it's not just the National Anthem Bill. So we all know that the legislation of National Anthem Bill is to convey the message that we must respect the national anthem. If one deliberately tries to insult the flag, there will be consequences. No other member has indicated his wish to speak. I will be the last speaker. 2 more minutes to 6:30. I might extend the meeting by a few minutes, but not up to 15 minutes, I believe. I have 2 points to make. Now, I hear some opposing views in this public hearing. I think some of them don't really pass muster. They don't really, they are not fully backed by logic. First, the prosecution time bar. Some say this is a harsh version. Some say that it's in retribution. Now, we legislate the National Anthem Bill because we don't want people to insult the anthem and the country. If someone tries to do that, if there's sufficient evidence, we will prosecute. If they do it now the government will act right away as soon as there's evidence. It doesn't have to act in retribution a long time later. So if someone breaks the law, prosecution would take place as soon as the evidence is available. Now, some members speak that even in China, the offender will only be detained administratively, but they don't have to go to jail. Now, in Hong Kong, if someone commits an offense, he will most likely not be sentenced to the maximum. He can be either not prosecuted, or he might be sentenced, or perhaps to a fine, or to in some other way. So some people say that Hong Kong penal penalties are stricter than in mainland. Now, I think that is not a very appropriate conclusion to draw. So this is the end of the members' questions part. The next meeting will be 18th of March, next Monday, from 8:45 in the morning. If there's no AOB, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.